Okay, do we have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, those meeting minutes are tabled. And Richard, maybe under workshop business or communications, we can discuss the other. All right, thank you. Next on the agenda, projects of minimal impact report.
There were no projects of minimal impact for this month to report.
Thank you. Moving on to the next agenda, public comments by visitors. At this time, if you would like to talk about anything with the board, or if you have any business to do with the agenda tonight, please come up and do so now, unless you are the petitioner for the signed. All right, seeing there is none, we'll move on to old business. Any old business that may come before the commission tonight? All right, seeing there is none, we will move on to new business. Going fast already, guys. All right, first on the agenda, Silas Moylan is seeking a certificate of appropriateness to repair a porch roof, install a railing, and replace decking and posts for a property located at 123 Main Street. Dana.
Yep, so the applicant is, as you mentioned, proposing to repair the porch roof to include repair of uppermost horizontal structural beam to be wrapped in a white trim to match the existing, repair or replace the vertical posts with concrete lolly columns and wrap in trim to match. He's going to raise the height of a handrail to be code compliant and replace decking in kind as needed. There's been a few applications for historic applications for this property, things such as roofing. They've done some vinyl siding, various repairs to the exterior, and replacement of shingles.
All right, thank you. Would you like to come up and speak a little bit more about the project?
Sure.
We'll ask that you do it in front of the mic and make sure the green light's on. And then just state your name for the record.
Hi, Silas Moylan.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm hoping to get a building permit to repair the porch and the roof structure above the porch and the post below it, and put it back as closely as possible to what it is now, except for the heights. Change the trim as needed and reuse as much material as possible.
All right, then I'll open it up to the board for questions for this applicant. Tim, I saw you reach for the mic.
Yeah, I did. So questions about material. It's not mentioned in your application of what material will be used. Could you speak to that?
For replacing the trim, I use an exterior prime pine from the lumberyard, whatever's available that's affordable. And that's what's there now is 3/4 inch pine, painted white. And for the structural portion, again below, I use a concrete lolly column with an appropriate fastener at the base and top. And for the beam, where it's elevated above ground level and covered by a roof, I'll simply use framing lumber, again wrapped in pine and painted white.
Is your intention to enclose those lolly columns with the trim and in detail the way they are currently?
Yes. Yeah, and I'm going to reuse as much of the material that's there, and I don't know that the lolly columns that are within the trim are necessarily rotted, but the one that's uphill the most is not wrapped, and it is rotted, so I assume the others are similar.
The turn columns that are currently being used, if they need to be replaced, will they be replaced with turned columns?
If there's any portions that need to be replaced, I'll add on to the top or bottom, but I don't know how I would replace those or even afford to attempt to replace those, so I'm going to keep those.
And in your opening statement, you mentioned that you wanted to increase the height?
Right now, the handrail on the upper porch is about 32 inches. And I'd like to bring it up to either 36 or 42, whatever the code enforcement officer says. So A, it's safe for the future tenants, and B, for insurance. Looks good for the insurance agent inspector. Right now, the insurance rate there is high because the exterior of the building is old.
Correct. So the overall railing system would not need to meet current code. It's exempt under historical structures in an historical district and existing building code.
Okay.
But you could add an additional railing above it to increase the height. But your challenge is going to be that those attachment locations are going to end up being in the round curved section of those columns versus on the square ends that are already being used.
Yes, I recognize that as a challenge. I didn't know I could keep that existing height.
You-
Even
you
if I leave those railings right where they are, I am going to add some sort of board up above.
Right, because there's a provision in the building code that exempts that as an historic, because it's in an historic district, and it was installed to code when it was installed, it can keep that.
Okay.
Your insurance company doesn't usually like hearing that, and they may want you to improve it, but you don't necessarily need to change the height of the railing. It's there. Here, you may need to add something else, like a secondary piece of railing. That's just to let you know.
Thank you. That's good advice. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Tim. Any other questions from board members?
You're the owner and you're also going to be the contractor? I'm just not seeing a contractor listed on the paperwork.
On the building permit application, I listed my father, who's a contractor, as the
Sorry, okay.
as the contractor, and it'll be he and I doing the work together.
Okay,
I'm a carpenter, but I'm not a contractor. I don't work for myself.
thank you. I was just curious because I didn't see a different, usually we have a different name listed, so. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board members? No? Oh, Richard.
And there's no work to the siding or the rest of the building, just basically the porches themselves?
That's the most urgent exterior repair, and once I get this done, and hopefully later on this summer, I am going to make an application to change the asphalt siding back to wooden clapboards, white wooden clapboards, but that's down the line.
That's what we want to hear, that a new application will come forward if you do go that way, and then we also pinged my ears with clapboard. So that's good news. All right.
That's what's under there now,
Right. And hopefully maybe some of it's in good condition that once you remove those, you'll know, but you won't know until you get there. Matt?
I do have a question. It's in regards to the very back stairwells. There's two of them that go into the back side of the porch. Both of those have railings that appear to be metal pipes or wooden dowels of some sort. Are those going to be replaced in any way that would match the railing on the front and side of the porch?
I don't have plans to. I could include that in the scope of work to change that railing. I'd be happy to.
I was just curious. I certainly would not ask that of you because it's at the back. It's probably not well seen, and it would be an additional expense, but aesthetically it would certainly tie it all together. But I more just was a curiosity, so thank you.
I'll take a look and see what is available. The very back section of the porch that is part of the addition, the railing and the balusters are different than the ones that are in the very front, which are of a different vintage.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have any motions?
I motion that we approve the work. It looks like he's actually keeping it as we would expect and maybe improving it in terms of looks.
All right, so we have a motion to accept as presented. Do we have a second? We have a second. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All right, motion passes as is.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda, SOS Recovery Community Organization is seeking a certificate of appropriateness to install an acrylic wall-mounted sign, an acrylic projecting sign, and a hanging wood sign for a property located at 69 High Street. Dana?
The applicant is proposing to install new signage for a new business at this location. Two of those signs are proposed to be acrylic signage. There are some wooden signage being proposed as well. This property has had a few applications through the historic district. One was for a commercial renovation of the exterior, and then various other ones for signs.
All right, thank you. Do we have an applicant to speak about the project?
Hello there, Emmett Soldati. So I am a representative for SOS Recovery. You probably recognize me because I owned the business that sold to SOS Recovery. Part of that arrangement was a consulting agreement, so I'm helping assist in some of the restaurant opening of the restaurant, which is named Folded. So I'm just sort of here to speak. John Burns, who is the executive director of SOS Recovery, had to get his son. In thinking about putting this sign permit together, we basically attempted to conform to everything that had been previously permitted so that it doesn't change the look and feel of it. We are working with Sundance Signs, who did the install work for the current sign that is for Teetotaler that will be coming down. That was an acrylic sign, but it is painted. That is the plan here as well. So for that projecting sign, we did receive the previous owner, there was a permit for it. We just never installed one. So the goal is to put up a projecting sign that would be painted acrylic, sort of have that 3D look to it. The wall-mounted sign, the center one, is the same. It's painted acrylic. And then the hanging signs below, the previous permit was acrylic. We were actually hoping to upgrade and have wood signs that are hanging directly below the awning.
I did see that, the added hanging. All right. Do we have any questions for the applicant tonight? Richard?
When you say acrylic, it kind of makes me think of a plasticky look, but you also say it's painted. So is it just a plastic product that's essentially painted?
Yeah, it's the exact same thing. If you drive by and see Teetotaler, it's pink. The material is like a PVC, but it's painted with any other like kind of exterior paint, so it has almost like a painted wood look.
Yep. Okay, it's just kind of my question. We've had one slip by us that looks like high gloss plastic, and it just doesn't fit the character. So.
Yeah, it'll be matte, and we're using the exact same vendor to create the sign and do the install.
Yep. No, it sounds suitable to me. Thank you.
Matt?
Two questions. One being the new signs will go, I'm assuming just based on the drawings here, but just want confirmation, will go in the same location that the Teetotaler sign is, right, on that upper section of the building?
Yeah, the only difference, so the logo, it will be in the exact same position. There are these sort of kind of rectangular cutouts for the building that were never utilized, and the goal was to put some words and signage, and that's sort of included, and that's additional.
That was going to be my next question, was there's almost like a wooden like board and batten pattern in that section, and so the sign's going to be set into that?
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Thank you.
Tim?
The hanging signs that you spoke about, they're going to be hanging from underneath the awning and the canopy? And
Correct.
those will be wood?
Correct, yep. The plan just there was we were going to make them, like, have them made after these, the signs from Sundance were made.
And it's not, thank you.
And I understand that the three, I'm just a little worried about clearance for walking. Are we sure, like, we're good with how low that's gonna hang with the three?
Yeah, so on the elevations, I don't know if there's a height, but everything will be, the hanging signs with the three would still be higher than the hanging signs below the awning,
Okay.
which would even be higher than what the original hanging signs were, because they were round.
Okay. Perfect. Any other questions for the applicant? Yes.
So essentially you want all of the signs that so you have a hanging sign, you have where it says Teetotaler now, you're gonna have it say Folded, Community Diner, then brunch on one side and lunch on the other side. So essentially that whole facade is gonna be sign covered.
Yeah, and part of that is originally Teetotaler only occupied the sort of left 2/3 of the building. The right, most recently, was T's Hair Salon. The entire first floor is going to be this restaurant.
Do you feel like that fits in with the community that's down there in terms of the signage?
Yeah, I think originally when the design, like the historical design, whatever those cutouts, it was sort of intended to be where like different businesses would say pharmacy, hardware, and so forth. And our goal was to sort of utilize that to sort of harken back to the historic character of the building.
Okay.
Matt?
Just a quick question about the projecting sign. Could you provide some info on the brackets that will hold it onto the building? The packet shows it just kind of like a projecting bar with the brackets there, but it's white like the sign itself, and was just hoping for more detail on like what the brackets will be.
I could get more detail from Sundance. They're doing all the install. I know they use bolts for the other sign. I imagine it would be that, and we could paint them.
Okay, great. Yeah, we actually don't have any purview over color. I was just more curious about like material, and like I guess I did ask about color, but it was more out of curiosity.
Yeah, totally.
Any other question for the applicant?
One.
All right, Tim?
The sign that Matt was just speaking about, the metal brackets bolted, and the front elevation, where did it go? It's because it's straight on. Whereabouts on the building will that particular sign be mounted?
So there's like a brick trim on each side of the building, and so the intent was to put it on the left brick.
Oh, that's it? Didn't see it. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I have to say I'm very happy to hear that this is moving forward, because I know it got announced, but then I was noticing that since you sold, that there hadn't been much movement over there, so I'm very happy to see that this is in fact moving forward. I'm particularly in favor that it is using the banding around the building, similar to your point that that was usually used for either advertising or signage, very much in the 40s and 50s kind of idea, especially around diners. I like that it's fitting within that. To Richard's point, I'm happy to hear it's going to be painted. It's not going to be high gloss, that it's a higher finish. So I'm very much in favor of this. I think it's going to work well with the building. So do we have any motions or any further questions?
I'll make a motion
George?
to accept.
All right, we have a motion to accept.
Second.
We have a second. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Me.
All right. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, 85 Elm Street LLC is seeking an amendment to its certificate of appropriateness to add additional residential units, remove underground parking, and alter exterior building material for property located at 85 Elm Street. Dana.
Yeah. So as Laura mentioned, the applicant is looking to revise their previously approved from November 2022 certificate of appropriateness, which was to construct the new building, 128 units, and demolish 3 structures. So at this time, the focus is upon the building changes, where they are changing some architectural features, where they're removing the underground parking, and they'd be adding new residential units under there. And they have some proposals for changes in the materials of the building. As you may remember, there are some various applications that have been approved for the different structures there. In particular for the 85 Elm Street, where that is going to be the remaining building from this project. There has been replacement of a 2-story deck, some signage, more decking applications, and some siding approvals. One was denied, excuse me.
Great, thank you.
Hi, everyone. Rob Previty for the applicant. Here with my partner, Ben Stebbins, and our architect, Adam Morrill. As Dan mentioned, we had HDC approval on November 22nd, 2022. And that was for 128 multifamily units. We have a kind of presentation that we'll show you later on that kind of shows the differences of what we're proposing. But the long story short of it is that we are basically making two primary changes to the design. The first is to remove the underground parking. We had about 35 underground parking spaces on the Elm Street side of the building and move it off-site. And we're going to put multifamily units down there as well, which I think you'll see in the design and much improves the streetscape along Elm Street, just because we have some more windows, some more activation there. It's, I think, an improvement on the design, as well as some other modifications internally, just for your reference, to increase, to add some additional units on some of the other floors as well, but that doesn't really affect the exterior of the building. The other is to, if you'll recall, we were approved with a lot of water-struck brick on the exterior of the building. Since, in the past year or so, brick prices have gone up dramatically, and when we were starting to price out the building, the brick was adding a very, very substantial cost to the project, so much so that it was almost making the project infeasible. So we're here with a proposal to switch the brick to clapboard. We're going to use hardboard clapboard to just get the cost more in line, and also kind of, I think, try to stay in keeping with like the surrounding building materials of the vernacular architecture in the neighborhood. We also, just for your reference, looked at some other alternatives to brick, kind of brick-like siding. Specifically, Drive-It was our preference, but it turns out that that's not easily insurable anymore for residential buildings. Wood frame residential, it's a fire risk, so finding contractors to even install is difficult. So we had been hoping to retain that additional brick feature or the original brick feature of the building, but after really getting into the construction drawings for the project, we couldn't make it work. So we're here, for a modification of our approval on that point as well. And then also, just because you'll see in the designs, we've decreased a lot of the concrete along Elm Street as well. We've removed the stamped concrete in this design as well, but we think it's kind of a neutral impact on the project just because of the less impact of the concrete, and also the increased landscaping along Elm Street that we're going to put in. So with that, I'll turn it over to Adam. He can kind of take you through our actual renderings.
I think each of you have the originals. I think each of you have the original submitted packages. We could project this, but as you're flipping through, I think that might just be as easy as anything else. So working through the process, a lot of this is similar presentation format as we had previously. On page 2, you can see the local on-site and immediate adjacencies to this property, including the 85 Elm Street as discussed, 2 Pleasant Street, a few properties on Green Street, as well as adjacencies, the old hotel on Elm Street. And then page 3 is just going to give you, remind you of the site context specific to the property that we're discussing. Page 4 is the previously submitted precedents that we had included in our original submission. On page 5 is the primary Elm Street corner that we focused on as part of our earlier HDC discussions. And in this elevation, you can see that lower level, the below grade on Green Street, that lowest level has now been infilled. Previously, there were open area ways between Elm Street and parking, the interior parking garage, as well as a ranging concrete wall that, at the corner of Church and Elm was 2.5 feet. And as you work your way down Green Street, work your way along the building, increased to, almost 8 feet. In this new design, we've carried fiber cement down over the concrete foundation below at the corners. We've replaced the brick with clapboard siding. in this accent material. And as part of this presentation, we'd like to talk to you. I know HDC doesn't have a purview over color, but we have looked at several different color options and we've brought samples. I think you've received a supplemental packet tonight that included a couple color options as well. But that accent material, that accent color is being proposed now covering the concrete retaining wall that was at the corner of Church and Elm and below the towers as you work your way down Elm Street, trying to reduce the amount of concrete touching the grass. We're trying to break up that facade. And previously, that brick was sort of supported above. Page 6, you can see that that corner immediately adjacent to 85 Elm Street, the warden's house, that elevation does not see a significant change. That corner had previously been proposed as clapboard siding in the field color, and that remains the same. In this view, really the difference is you can see a few of those towers in this image are no longer brick, but are being proposed as clapboard siding. And that sort of continues around to page 7. On page 8, the previous proposal included, again, those brick towers and board and batten with the entry in that inside corner. This proposal, again, replaces that, the brick tower, but also incorporates a little bit more of the accent color to celebrate that entry on the inner corner. Worth noting that central entry point, the square footage has slightly been reduced. However, it has the same composition that it previously had, with an entry facing Green Street, the primary vehicular entrance and pedestrian entrance to the site. So it still presents to the street and to visitors the same, but that footprint has been reduced as we've worked through the interior layout of the building. On page 9, you can see the Green Street side as you're working your way towards the north. Page 10, you'll see that interior entry. So we were trying to keep the character of the previously approved project in massing and a lot of the elements that we had previously discussed, but trying to replace that brick with a material that could really fit with the math of this project. And as Rob had mentioned, we've investigated EFS, we've investigated other materials, and there were concerns with insurance. There was concerns about the quality of the product. We even looked at vinyl and things like that. And the consensus was really that fiber cement would be the longest lasting product for this property that could maintain some of the character that we had previously presented. And in looking at this project, you know, the way that the brick had broken up some of the corners and things, I think the accent materials can actually provide that same support that the previous project had incorporated, but also present some efficiencies for the project. So, and then the balance of the presentation includes the 2D elevations as well as just some of the materials as previously presented.
All right. And any more before we, okay. I know you said you had a presentation about the 3D renderings from all around like we've seen before. How does the board feel like they would like to see those renderings?
No.
No? You feel comfortable with as presented in the packets? Okay, just want to make sure.
And again, those colors in the actual submission packet, I think it's worth noting, the supplemental materials are also part of this submittal. You know, right now there's 2 tones of gray, but there's also, I think it's on the supplemental package on page 3, there's a sort of a French gray or a sort of a dark warm blue, sorry, a French blue, that seems to be a favorite among a lot of the people that have touched this project. So,
All right, thank you. Matt?
Thank you.
Actually, sorry, hold.
Absolutely.
We are going to open it up to abutters, and then we will bring you back up for questions. So sorry. Do we have anybody who would like to talk about the project before we?
Want to look at mine? It's kind of ugly. Since you're going to live next to it.
Yeah.
Placation with color. Yeah. Placation with color. So this is a no for me. I'll just put that out. It's already a no for me.
All right.
I think it's interesting that we're placating with colors since we don't want to do brick. I also think that this is a committee who constantly tells other homeowners who are less affluent than you that it is not their province to talk about finances. For example, slate roofs have to be replaced. I own one. And we don't get a break on finances. So to come before us and say, hey, it's too expensive for us on this, what is it, $45 million project, that you don't want to do brick and you want to get rid of the stone lintels and you want to get rid of the windows because it looks like we're going with cheaper windows also in the packet, just doesn't really work for me. And I'm probably the minority in this board, but I will stand firm and say this is a project that is going to make the agent's house, which is one of the best features we have in the city, dwarfed and ugly, and it looks even worse when I see your renderings of how close this is to it, which was one of my original concerns. And now you're coming back and saying, hey, thanks for the approval. We want to put more units in, and we want to get rid of the brick feature that we talked about. So I recognize that I tend to be the voice of brusqueness, so the other folks will be probably less aggressive than I am, but this is a no for me. This is a project that you came in and said this is going to fit in our community, and this does not fit. This looks like something you would see in Dover. This looks like something I see tons of in Revere and Watertown, and they're going up in just mass housing. This is not the area for that. If you want to put it out on 108 or you want to put it somewhere else, great, but not next to one of the best properties in the city for historical value.
All right. I just, before we move on to the board, you did not have any comments, and we can bring the applicants back up then. All right. And Matt, we will go to you.
Thank you. Don't sell yourself short, Ms. Schoen. I agree with one part of this project, and that is your request to add additional apartments in the basement, or in the lower floor, excuse me. But that would be all that I would agree with. I think that this board worked hand in hand with you through many multiple meetings to come up with a design that all of us could agree upon, and I'm a bit disappointed that you have come before us to request major changes that are not in line with what we initially discussed and agreed upon. The city has been generous to you. I've sat on a number of committees on the city side that have allowed you to make this project affordable and allow it to move forward with the city. We've rented parking spaces to you all. We have froze your tax rate on this building for 7 years after it's completed. And I see no reason that you should not be able to make this project move forward as was initially proposed. I feel like you've come to us with two contradictory statements, being that you want to increase the number of apartments, which is an increased expense on you and the developers, yet at the same time are saying that you are unwilling to actually bear the costs of the expenses that you previously agreed to. And so I am not the developer, and I would urge you to go back to the drawing board to come up with alternate ways that do not impact the previously approved plans for the exterior of this building that could save you and your company money so that this project can still move forward. Again, I hear your demands. I absolutely understand. I want this project just as much as you all do, honest to God. I think our community deserves a large number of housing in our downtown so that our downtown can thrive. I would love to see people walking out of this apartment going to shops. We just saw a new shop that's hopefully opening soon called Folded that I would love for folks from this apartment building to go and spend their money at. But I believe that the standards of this historic district stand true, and that if this building were to be approved as you're proposing tonight, it would set a precedent for the historic district for the future of Somersworth, and that could be a quite dramatic precedent that would then alter proposed buildings in the future. We need to keep our buildings, especially new ones, within the standards that we all believe to be written down in ordinance and what we have seen within our rules that we have all worked on. I do not think that what you have brought forward is in line with that. Again, I will say it again, we worked tirelessly as a board and with you all. Again, I don't want to discredit the work that you have done as well, but we worked tirelessly to come to agreements about what this building should look like. A lot of thought went into those decisions, into the brick, into the windows, into the stamped concrete. And I think that to throw that out the window in the 11th hour is a bit disappointing. That's all.
All right, Tim?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll echo nearly exactly what Councilor Matt here is saying. Not only did we hear a request for different forms of siding versus the brick, and we declined those requests on a few occasions and through multiple meetings. It's seemingly sort of like the child wanting a cookie, and mom says, no, can I have a cookie? No, can I have a cookie? No. And you're here asking for the cookie again. And the answer to me is still going to be no. The parking garage and changing that out to apartments, that's not a concern for me either. If you want to put that's a zoning thing. If you can find places to park, that's not historic district problems. But even to the window layout, they're on that one same facade. You have now in the center columns of the right side windows, there's there's 3 rows of double mullions, but in the original approved, there were 2 rows of double mullions and 2 rows of single overhead over each other. So even those windows the layouts are different. If we were to split this application in half and say you in favor of filling in the venting locations for the garages and putting in windows for parking, to eliminate the parking, I'd say approved. But to lose and not at least acknowledge all the work that both you're as a presenter and us as a board put into to come to this, minimizing the brick to the point where we did, the sidewalks, the decorations, all of it, and then, Mom, can I have a cookie? So I would say no to the cookie. So that's what I'm saying.
All right. I'll go, and then I assume if Richard has some comments. I'm looking at previously things that we looked at when we had these design decisions, and I wanted to give a little more feedback on the particular reasons. This is not an ugly building. I don't want you to come away with that this is not a good design and different things, but I do mimic other board members where if this was in a new area, I'd be in complete support of it. But when I'm looking at around our district specifically, the larger buildings, and I know this was one of our original comments, the larger buildings tend to have brick. They tend to have masonry, cement, different types of material in that aspect. This one doesn't fit into the larger buildings, even within the direct vicinity. If you look at even just the ones on page 2, the GE building, the larger portions are cement, brick, stone. If you look at the 2 Pleasant Street, again, it's all brick. The 10 Green Street, the church, that again is a brick building as you start getting into those larger aspects. Again, I know we had a conversation of what are you trying to mimic in our district? Like you have to choose, you can't have aspects from each and every one. Where this definitely to me mimics your 85 Elm Street project, but it's the scale of it with that difference in the materials of how you start getting bigger, the materials tend to change. Now, that's just looking at those. I also wanted to just kind of go into specifically, your page 4 of the other apartment buildings you were looking at specifically, and I kind of wanted just to give a little context there. Ivory Keys apartment and Watermills apartment. Ivory Keys is very similar to what you've come back with, and it's, again, this is a beautiful building, it's nothing against that, but when you look at the context of our buildings, the 2 lower examples you gave fit within our district a lot better. And the reason of that is because, again, brick, or at least the first level of the one at Queensbury Mill Apartments has the brick on the first facade, the lower facade. So it's that different context that you're referring to, and that's why the board is having the reaction they are, because we want it to fit within our district. We don't want it to be, what is that doesn't fit within what we wanted, kind of ideas. So I just wanted to give a little clarification from my side of when I look at this, it is a beautiful building, and I do mimic that if this was proposed anywhere else, I love this, this is beautiful. However, looking at it next to some of the key features in our historic district, that's partly where the board went with some of these. So I'm a little not in favor of the changes that you're proposing. I also wanted to talk a little bit, I know you gave us the site plans back, and I understand it was one of the ones in here, 67 Elm Street. That is where the new parking is going to be proposed, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, was there any other, did I miss that there was another one, or that you just acquired other parking? I just want to make sure.
Yeah, we have, so one of the spaces in 67 Elm, and we know that we need a separate historic district review on that for landscaping and things like that, as well as a CUP for the use from the planning board.
All right.
But yeah, we do require, we have other off-site parking as well that's existing.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to make sure, like, I didn't miss any of the other changes to, because we know 67 Elm Street, that got an approval to be demolished. We kind of figured that this might come back in this aspect. So I am happy to hear that might be part of this project in that realm, but the other thing I will say, as a positive note, I was happy that you were very cognizant of that. Sorry, let me get the right view here. Sorry, there's a lot of them. Ugh. The page 9, the Elm Street, where you're driving into the apartment complex, because you know we had talked about that's a 3-story. We want it to appear 3-story because that's where people come in. It's more in line with the rest of the buildings around that road. I am happy to hear that that didn't change to the extent some of the others did, where you're filling in that lower parking garage. I just have a very hard time with this being completely board and batten to me. And I just kind of wanted to give you background as to why that's a little bit of a hard sell for me personally. And then I will stop and I'll open it up to anybody else. Richard?
Well, we all know I hate the overall size and scale of this. I've come to accept this is just the size of the building it's going to be. Going back to the whole thought of it being a mill-like building, I don't think it really fit before because of the brick towers to it. I think it broke it up too much to look like a mill building. And if you're proposing to do away with brick like this, I would think if we could get the first floor to be brick, so that it kind of looks like at Queensbury Mill, which you reference on page 4 as well. It's the bottom left one. But I still think that it would need to look like a mill again. And the different changes, the stepping back of the walls takes away from that. I think it makes it a modern looking building. And just recently I took some pictures around. I would have loved to have seen it look like several buildings, but we didn't go with that route. Instead, we're trying to make it look like other modern buildings that have an upstairs that is different, stepping back, different variations. Just, they look like all these modern buildings that have been built around that don't fit in a historic district. And I don't think that the new rendition of this fits any better than the old one did. I think it's worse. I would rather see the old one if I still had my say, but I'm hoping maybe we can make a little bit more positive changes. I do find it interesting that Berwick is putting up a building much smaller, more in scale with what they have in their area. I'd love to know the developer that's doing this sort of work, because he's even putting the trim up, he's got the eaves, so it can be done. and to scale. But back to your building, a much bigger one, if it's gonna look like a mill, make it look like a mill. All four of these buildings on page 4 have a standard look all the way across, a repeating window, not different variations of windows, no columns that run up and down. I'm thinking if we're going with a mill look, we need a mill look.
One question I had when I was looking through this, because I do know, you did work with us where originally the parking below didn't have the archways, and you put in the archways, and we were very much supported that, because I know Richard mentioned that very much like I said, the Queensberry Mill, that bottom floor is brick, or at least, it could appear to be brick in some cases, or even a stone, some kind of stamped concrete, something that would break up where this is all board and batten. My other question is, and again, I'm not the designer, I know that this is very complicated. I'd almost would love to see just that bottom layer stay brick. And then I understand that these would be apartments and this might be a hard ask, but would there be a way to keep those arches and then fill windows in accordingly around that? I get that that's a very hard ask to do, but I think that's also one of the key features I particularly like that made it fit within the district of a feature that you would typically see in an older building, where they have arched windows, they have different things that are not completely standard across the way. In some mills, it is all the way, but I think if that original floor is different in some way, I'd be more amenable to changes. Yes.
Just, sorry, one request for clarification. Are you saying the windows would be arched to match that, or would it be like the church where there's a brick arch that was infilled with a material and then there's a standard
So
form there?
I honestly, if we could get the brick to stay on that first level and then have windows fit into that, whether the windows are arched or they just fit in and it appears to look that way, I would probably be in favor of either, depending on how that comes out. Because I do know that you can put a square window with a little bit, and then the brick itself is the arch, not the window. So I know there's a cost difference there, obviously. But those are just things that went through my head as looking at this was, even if the rest has to be board and batten, I have a hard time with that bottom one because that's, again, a feature of mills and different things of that sort. Any other board members have comments, questions? George?
I knew you were going that way. I just want to say it's not looking good for the brick here, but I would have to agree with Richard and Laura that maybe the bottom be brick somehow. Maybe that's enough to make it.
So we can put brick on this building, but to make the numbers work, the upper floors would have to be vinyl. So just to be clear, brick doesn't work. The project's too expensive, and we're not going to build it, and we're just going to leave it in an empty parking lot.
Great.
That's
Works for me.
okay. Thank you.
Matt?
Again, I want this project to work. But I'm a bit dismayed that you would submit initial plans for it to go forward.
We didn't.
Please don't cut me off. Thank you. I would be I am again dismayed that you would submit initial plans for a project with agreements between the number of people sitting here and you all, and are that now coming back with something like this. I understand cost change. Again, I work on the city side. We also see cost change all the time. But I would imagine there's an amount of contingency built into the project that would allow for certain changes in the costs. And again, the addition of the floors on the bottom makes the project more costly, and thus may or may not potentially be what is accounting for these other changes with the siding.
So can I, let me just, because we're not, I like brick too. I'd love to put brick on the building. But when we started this project like a year and a half ago, right? We spent 6 months in HDC meetings with you guys, during which time interest rates doubled, right? Like banks aren't lending on projects like this right now. It's really, like we've talked to every bank in the area. They're all quoting rates that won't, that make this project a non-starter with a brick. The underground parking is $40,000 a space. Switching it out to apartments, yes, it increases the cost, but it also increases the revenue. So you come out ahead. That was one of the reasons why we invested in buying a very expensive parking lot at 67 Elm Street. As to the brick, when you're bringing plans through conceptually, you have a rough estimate of the cost at the time that you're bringing them through. But until you actually have construction drawings, like full architectural drawings, you can't get firm bids. And even now, we're not at a stage yet because we have to figure out how to solve this problem to get firm bids. So we're seeing right now in the market that brick adds $1 million to this project, which sinks our budget.
And I do just want to clarify, sorry, I forgot my mic. I know right now we are talking a lot of finance. Unfortunately, this board cannot take that into consideration. We do understand it is an aspect, but it's not supposed to sway our opinions. So again, I just want to make sure that that's very clear. We understand the reality of things, but we cannot let that sway our decisions. But Matt, I don't know if you were done, but I do have a question based on.
I just have two recommendations.
Okay,
that's all.
please.
But I'll let the gentleman finish if you had more thoughts.
Please ask away to the extent we have answers for you.
One recommendation would be for the board, just reading the tea leaves, that we deny this project in its entirety or this application in its entirety, which yields a second recommendation for the developers, which would be please take in consideration the number of comments that were made by the board tonight. We certainly seems as if, again, reading the tea leaves with no vote in front of us, but it seems as if we are amenable to the additional apartments in the bottom, but we would certainly like to see a design that better fits what was initially approved and includes the number of recommendations and preferences that the board had stated tonight.
So one comment, and I know we keep saying brick. I do understand that because, again, that was part of the initial comment. Have you looked into stamped concrete, and is that something that could be amenable on that first floor, or has that been looked into just curiosity-wise?
We could accommodate this. Well, not maybe I don't know about on the first floor, but we could incorporate some of that back into the design if it would be helpful. But we'd have to look at the.
And I understand that some of the stuff we're maybe proposing where you might not have an answer, it might have to be looked back into, and I get, again, that's time, that's renderings, that's other things. I don't know what the market's doing for the cost of concrete versus brick, any of that, because I can't factor that in. But even just, because if you did a stamped concrete and then it was a color, it would look very similar to that other rendering that we're referring to, sorry, not rendering, but other mill that you've referenced. Where, okay, if we can't do that, it would just at least give that illusion that it's a different material, it's not the same board and batten across kind of idea, or even the same idea if we broke up the columns with the stamped concrete. Again, I don't know the feasibility of that, but that would be something that me personally, I would probably prefer over complete board and batten, with just it fitting within the context of the area better. So that's, again, my personal opinion based on what you've come back with versus the original. I would like to see something similar to that. It doesn't have to be brick in my opinion, but again, it's a different type of material that breaks that up based on what we were looking at the beginning. So I know Matt had a thought to the board. I also would put out another thought that this can be tabled for further review or anything like that. But that's, again, you guys' choice to do that. Whether we can take a vote, we can go forward, but again, those are decisions that we would put on you if you want to table or not to explore more.
We'll take the vote.
Okay. Right. Any other questions or comments for? Yes.
We're not supposed to consider financing, but we have an obligation as a board to be consistent in our decisions. And when we have folks like these guys who are smaller business owners coming before us saying, hey, I just want to replace railings, or I just want to replace a roof, and we say, hey, sorry, you got to find a slate roofer, you got to find the right material. I think that we have to be consistent in our rulings and saying, hey, no, brick is what we've asked for, brick is what we agreed on several sessions with this board. That needs to be what we're doing. You don't get your put a camel's nose under this tent and go, okay, we got the approval, now we're going to change it, which we had an issue with this board some months ago, and we all were sad about the way that went down. So I think we have to be consistent. Otherwise, homeowners can come in and say, you let $15 million folks get away with it. Why can't we? There needs to be consistency. And I also know that there were huge tax breaks for this building. There were huge city tax breaks for this building. I'm not feeling like, if you want to show me the whole budget, we'll have a discussion. But I know that those extra units, all of which are market rate, none of which are low-income housing, don't mean that you're not going to make a large profit on this building.
But again, a purview of our board.
Understood, and that's why I said we have to be consistent. And if we're gonna do this for them, then other homeowners get to come in. All the people on High Street who have slate roofs can come in and say, I can't afford to do it. I can't find a roofer. And what do we say? No, the bigwigs get it, but you don't? That's gonna come up.
That is not what's being said, so I just want to make sure we are staying within the purview of our board. I understand your point about consistency, so agreed. However, every project is different. We have to do what's best for every project.
I agree.
So,
And we need to be consistent.
yes. All right. Any other comments, questions, or do we have a motion?
I motion that we deny the project.
Right,
Hands
we have a
down.
motion for deny the project as written. Do we have a second?
Deny the application if you don't mind.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Technical.
Don't
I
mean to
motion that we deny
correct
the
you, but-
application.
Okay. We have a motion to deny the application as it is submitted. Do we have a second?
A little more discussion.
Tim?
Was the applicant asked if he wanted to table? I didn't hear the answer.
It was asked, and I believe it was said no.
Yeah,
They
we
would
don't-
prefer a
We don't want
vote.
a table, we'd like a vote.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, we have a motion for denying the application. Matt?
I'll second.
We have a second. All right, all those in favor of denial of the application, and please show of hands.
Aye.
All right, 5. All those opposed of denial? All right, so 5-2, so the application has been denied.
Thank you.
So now they're gonna appeal it, right? Can they do that? That's on that board though, right?
All right, I will be passing around the application to be signed, please, so do not leave before doing that. Next on the agenda, workshop business. Richard, do we have any workshop business?
I don't believe so. I think we approved the rules of procedure and so on last time, so that was pretty much all the workshop we had going on
Okay,
that I'm aware of.
I believe that was the case, but I was just wanted to make sure my memory was correct on that. Any other workshop business that come before the commission? Do we want to throw in the street signs around
That's
workshop?
what I was going to ask about. Yeah, we were kind of talking about that before.
Street signs. Trying to think what the most recent update is. I might have to get back to y'all on that. I know I was updated, but now I've totally forgotten. My mind is blank. I think the Elm Street project blocked me up. Sorry about that. Richard?
I do remember when we were talking about street signs, the name specifically, there was a discussion of having that little hump in the middle that said Historic District.
Yep.
And I don't think you were at the last meeting, but I mentioned to Ms. Mears, I believe she was here at that meeting, that, you know, that might be a problem if we have to stack them at an intersection where they get stacked, where they would mount where that bump is. So I kind of questioned how that would play in.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Tim saying they were I think they were held up by brackets, which might mitigate that.
I thought we had, Michelle had discussed that there are brackets that would be used to hold those signs up, not similar to the street signs that are the way they're currently mounted. They're more artistic and antiquated look to them. But I'm going to defer back to Michelle, but I think that's what I recollect.
I might also suggest that if it does become a problem in terms of stacking, like you're suggesting, that maybe just the top sign have the bump out. And then the bottom signs just be stacked as is. That might be something that I suggest also.
And just another thought, if we do move forward with these signs, I think we should do Beacon Street as one of the first streets. And just for a fun note on that is the last wooden sign that exists is actually on Beacon Street, so it'd be a fun way to replace it.
That sign is still there?
Yeah.
You can't read it, but it's there.
I had no idea.
I think it's just wood now. The paint's all gone. But yes, I love that idea.
If we take that sign down, we know where it goes, right? 'Cause I did have permission to take that down about 5 years ago, and I did.
All right. Seeing there is no other workshop business, we will move on to communication and miscellaneous. I'm going to jump in real fast before anybody derails my thinking here. Matt, I understand that the Vision 30, I'm going to butcher the name here, so Eyes on 30, thank you, are looking at doing historical markers and that they've identified a few. Can you give us a little background on that?
Yes, I sure can. There's 10 across the city. It's going through the mayor's office. They are going to be locations chosen through Eyes on 30, like you mentioned. I can pull up a list if you give me like 30 seconds after I finish talking, and I'll find those, what they are. I know I have them. But essentially they're going to be kind of phased in, and this is a program that the city is hoping to have long term. So the 10 is not like the final 10. We're hoping that this can grow to more locations across the city. These are going to be smaller signs with 66 characters for what will be included in the message that's on them. So it's smaller than like the state historic signs that you have probably all seen. I would say it's about half as wide and likely the same height. I want to say it's 18 by 24 if I'm guessing. But yes, we have a number of sites located around the city. This has now also been recommended to go to the Cultural Commission. Sounds like it came out of Eyes on 30. It's going to go through Cultural Commission and then go to full City Council for a vote. I'll let you guys discuss. I'll find this 10 sites. Give me like 30 seconds.
All right, thank you. So I was pleasantly surprised to hear about that, which I think is great. Anything to help mark historic items in Somersworth is always a positive in my aspect. So I'm excited for you to share the listing. But again, I think it's a move in the right direction that it won't always stop at 10 kind of idea. So I was happy to hear that. Any talk around that while he finds the list, or I can have another announcement, or...
Yeah, are these 10, Matt, are these cast in stone already? Or?
They are approved by, I believe, Eyes on 30, and now it's going to Cultural Commission. And then I think they're doing the same type of thing of looking at the sites and the layout and the style and all that. But again, it's going to be similar style to they'll be cast iron, they'll be again, same shape and size, except for smaller.
I'm just wondering if we had any input in.
I would happily take your input since I sit on the Cultural Commission.
Horn Cemetery.
Say that again?
The Horn Cemetery.
Yes, I love that idea.
I've been after that. I came to Somersworth.
Yeah.
That's priority. Sorry.
I love that. I do want to remind folks too that I will certainly bring that to Cultural Commission to see what their thoughts are. If it doesn't make it in the first 10, again, this is a program that the goal is to continually have more and more added every year. Yep. Let me just find that.
All right. I'll move on to another communication I have and then open it up. I am still getting the documentation that I talked about last time about that RAI does for plaques in their town, just so I can reference it and write up a similar one for us. I'm going to rely on George to let me know the next time the museum has a committee meeting, so I can bring it to them to see if they are interested in partnering with us on that the cost would be part of the application process, so they would not incur any costs, and maybe pad it a little bit to help support the museum, like an extra $5 or something per application kind of idea. But I will be getting that. It's just a little delayed, but it is still coming from me. So, all right. Any other communication and miscellaneous tonight? Tim.
So I've got just to point out a few things, and I don't know if Dana will be able to answer these questions. It's 4 months rather, asked about the retaining wall that has never been completed that we see cement blocks at on Winter Street. But more than beyond that it seems that signage in historic district, especially on Market Street, numerous businesses have just filled their windows with signage that is not appropriate for the district. It would probably violate our sign ordinances. Some of the glass, all the glass at the Mixed Martial Arts Center is 100% blocked with signage. You can't even see through there. Borderline Beverage is another business that seems to take advantage of it. State Line Mini Mart, some of them they do, other windows they don't. And as it begins to grow, others are saying, you know, they're adding, which is not consistent with what our rules of procedure or our sign ordinances dictate. And so it's beginning to show, in my opinion. So I just wanted to make that out there as far as that miscellaneous communication. That's my observation.
Can we ask Dana if she doesn't even know that she can take it away to have a conversation with the code enforcement?
I do not have an update on the Winter Street retaining wall. I am familiar with what property you're talking about. I'm aware of the properties you're speaking of for the signage. In regards to, more familiar with how it applies with the sign ordinance, less on for the historic regulations part from your rules of procedure. It doesn't really talk a lot about window signs, unless I'm incorrect.
No, unless things have changed in a year and a half, the 50% of the glazing can be covered.
Yeah, it's.
Now it's 100% down there, so I just, yeah.
Yep, and that's part of the sign ordinance.
It's 100%?
No,
No,
the 50%
okay,
is
right.
part of the sign ordinance.
But it affects the district we represent, so that's, I mean, much like we looked at the new restaurant where Teetotalers was, we talk about that signage, and we're not asked to talk about putting paper billboards in front of windows at another business, so just wanted to make, yep.
I will mention it to Shane.
Matt?
I have the list. Sorry for the delay. And it might even tell me the dimensions too. Yes, 24 by 18 inches. Will include the city seal and feature a blue background with white lettering and outline the history, obviously, of each site. And again, it's like 66 characters to be able to fit that in, which is, I think, a reasonable amount. So the 10 excuse me, I was wrong. It's 8. It's not 10. 8 locations are Willen Pond and Central Park, so that's one. Pearl's Bakery, which will include a background on the murder that took place there. Yes, but I think we'll be highlighting the murder at Pearl's Bakery, which is like fun history for the city. Fred Brown at the Old City Hall, Great Falls Manufacturing Company, the original Somersworth name spelled S-U-M-M-E-R-S, Worth, Noble Pines, the General Electric Building, Citizens Place, and the John Wentworth House. Those are the 8. So again, opportunity to discuss these. I'll bring forward Horn Cemetery as requested. Any other ideas before?
Just a quick question. The one about the Somersworth spelling, where is that sign proposed to be located?
It doesn't say.
Okay.
So I'll need to find that out.
Just curious.
I would bet you.
City Hall?
City Hall. Yeah,
that would be my bet,
guess.
but you never know.
Yeah. But I don't know for sure. So let me find that out. I'll write that down.
I'd like to say, Matt, when I said the Horn Cemetery, I don't mean like getting a little sign and putting it out by the thing. Something right downtown that says Horn Cemetery Historic Site.
Yes.
And that's what I'm thinking, but
We'd want it in like a more public location. Yeah, I would agree.
I mean, it's the fourth.
Exactly.
And maybe just a thought, have we ever talked about the cemetery committee about maybe opening up Horn Cemetery as adopt a spot for our city? Because I know we do other spots, but that one seems to be a little bit back in there, a little bit neglected. That could also drum up a little bit.
It's a public works question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know in the past during like cleanup day.
We have done it, yes.
That did it? Yeah.
We didn't do it this last one, but yeah.
But no, I think that's a great idea of having an adopt a spot.
Any other communication and miscellaneous?
One more thing.
Yes, Tim.
On my other hat that I wear is in the city of Portsmouth, I'm the approving inspector, which will be the new Aclara location. And it's about ready to receive a certificate of occupancy for their new location, so they'll be vacating this location imminently. And then what futures it'll bring, I'm sure we'll find out soon enough.
Give it to 85 Elm Street.
Hopefully, we find out soon enough that there is a plan for it, so yes.
Maybe 85 Elm Street wants it. Building
right.
would work great there.
Any other communication and miscellaneous? Any proposals?
I'd make a motion, we adjourn.
All right,
Second?
we have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, we are adjourned, but please give me back the denial, please. Thank you.